Welcome to Homicide Life on the Set, a podcast about the Emmy Award-winning television show Homicide Life on the Street, with myself, Chris Carr, and Susan Ingram. On today's podcast, we're joined by Jay Rabinowitz and Deborah Moran, who are both editors on the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Homicide Life on the Set, or today, Homicide Life in the Suite, because we're going behind the scenes of the editing of the show, and editing typically happens in an editing suite and not on set. Before we get into that, Susan, how are you?
Hey, good. Yeah, good. Good to see you, Chris. Super happy with this episode, and like with all our guests, really happy that they spent so much time with us, and and how enthusiastic everyone is and how enthusiastic they were to talk about the show so many years later. Really great. A good episode.
Yeah, it's lovely to hear all these stories. So Jay and Debbie, who are the editors on the show, Homicide, like for everybody we speak to, has been a very positive experience for them generally. And it's just such nice to hear the kind of mindset behind some of the choices that made Homicide what it was, because it had this sort of very different vibe, this sort of French New Wave inspired vibe about it, that with the jump cuts and so on, that were very unique to Homicide. And I don't think really many other shows have embraced it quite the way Homicide did. I mean, certainly in the 90s, jump cutting became a bit more popular with some other shows, MTV-inspired things, but Homicide embraced it in a very particular way that embraced the emotion of the scene. It was, to me, the jump cutting never felt overly jarring. It kind of propelled the story in a certain way where other people who jump cut for the sake of it don't, if that makes sense. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and he talked about, and we can talk about that more after people listen to the episode, but he talked about how that happened, the jump cutting, although it was part of the idea of the way they wanted the show to look because of Breathless, but also a lot of it was organic, was organic and came out of the energy of the writing and the acting and the way the show was shot.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. Let me just give the viewers a little more factoids about them. Jay cut the show from 1993 to 98. He did 26 episodes. And Debbie was a full editor from 98 to 99, doing 11 episodes, but had been assistant editor from 96 to 98 and did 48 episodes. I also do want to mention they are part of a giant editorial team that included 9 editors over the course of the show and 8, including Debbie, assistant editors over the course of the show. So there were 17 editors and assistant editors. Now that doesn't count the colorists, the online editors, the post-production people that handled post-production issues from the editorial department. So this is a giant team of people, and they mention a number of them at the end of the episode. But maybe we will name some more names at the end of our chat.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
And their origin stories are so, both of them different, very different origin stories about how they got to the show, which is, I think the viewers listeners will really appreciate it, enjoy.
Yeah. And both Jay and Debbie have gone on to work on some amazing films and television shows. If you IMDb them, you'll be shocked. I was shocked. I was like, wow.
Yes. Really impressive.
Yeah, definitely rubbing shoulders with greatness in this one. So, yeah, so it was really good.
Yeah, and great to talk to the people, not just like people think, well, on the set we're behind the scenes, but this is behind the scenes, right? Because after we shoot everything, it goes somewhere else, and there's a whole other crew of people working on the show to make it as wonderful and interesting and energetic a show as it was. So this is really going into areas that many people probably never think about and don't really understand or know about. And maybe some of the terminology we'll talk about at the end. What's a moviola? What's a Steenbeck? and what's Lightworks and what's Avid, just so people have a little bit more of an understanding between the digital cutting and the physically film cutting.
Yeah. Yes, because technology sort of changed during production. So
Totally changed, right?
So there we go. Cool. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add? Or
No, enjoy.
so enjoy this episode, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we did. And we'll catch you on the other side. Welcome to Homicide Life on the Set. Today we have Jay and Debbie, who both worked in the editorial department on the show. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, thank you for asking me. I'm thrilled to be here. It's such an honor.
Well, it's great to see both again in person, because I met you at the reunion, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think, Debbie, you pulled me aside because you'd been listening to this show, which was very kind of you to do that. So thank you.
Yeah, you too. I've loved the podcast so much. It's brought back such great memories, and I just love hearing everybody talk about. It's just been wonderful, and it's the one thing that keeps coming up is that everybody says it's the best job they ever had, and I've been asked that many times. What's your favorite show? And I realized it's what's Homicide, even though I don't think I realized it at the time because it was my first job. So, but it really is. It's the best job I've ever had.
Fantastic. I was worried you were going to tell us it was another show. It's like, screw Homicide.
And it's great to see you guys because, being on the set all the time, I never saw you guys.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I had never met Jay until the reunion either. So, so it just is a trip to have, worked on the same production for so long and really to not have known you guys. So funny.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we can speak too much to the title of the podcast. Life on the set is something
exactly.
that life in the editing booth.
We didn't often experience.
Maybe we'll change it just for this. We'll call it Homicide Life in the Suite.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Life in the Suite in New York with Tom Fontana. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So let's just jump in because, in addition to not working on the set with you guys and not being in the editing suite, and the editing suites being in New York, so also not even, I couldn't trip down the street and say, hey, I'm going to go find out what those guys are doing. We really, I really had no idea about your backgrounds. I hate to say that until, we started researching you for the podcast, and my goodness, both your backgrounds and the productions and the directors and actors and people that you've worked with is really stunning. And so happy doubly to have you on because you're also very, really experienced editors and recognized and award winning and all that. So let's just start with your background. So we'll start with Jay. What is your background and what was your pathway to editing? Because I see very early on you were doing music videos and documentaries, but got hooked up very early on with Jim Jarmusch. So you right from the get-go looked like you jumped into a great pool of people to work with. So how did you get into editing?
Yeah, I mean that's true, and the connection to Jim is actually what led to Homicide, as it led to almost everything else in my career, such as it is. I went to film school. I went to NYU. I finished NYU, and I was very, very lucky to connect with Jim Jarmusch, and long story how that happened, but it was very serendipitous. And I went to work on a film called Down by Law. And on Down by Law, we had an editor, Melody London. We had an assistant at the beginning who was filling in for another assistant. And then the originally intended assistant came on. And her name is Lori Mazzillo. And Lori Mazzillo and I spent the better part of a year working on Down by Law. And like most freelance jobs, we went our separate ways. But a few years later, I was 85 into 86. And a few years later, she was putting together a television show called Homicide: Life on the Streets. She was brought on, I think, as a kind of associate producer for post production, if I'm not mistaken. And their goal at the time, because it was sort of Barry Levinson's first foray into television, they wanted to find somebody who worked in independent features to make sure that he would be comfortable, with somebody who's coming out of the movie world. Um, and I didn't have a lot of experience at that point. I had just cut my first film for Jim in 1990, and Laurie thought they would like me, and she pushed real hard to get them to accept me, and I was brought on as the second editor. There was a more experienced editor. That was my understanding. There was a more experienced editor brought on to be the first editor, and I was excited to have the job as the second editor, and that's how it happened. Having worked with Laurie on Down by Law, she connected me with Tom and Barry, and helped bring me onto the project.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that early in your career that you
It
hooked up with
was.
Barry and Tom. Yeah,
It-
wow, that's amazing. And so how about you, Debbie? What was your pathway?
Well, I grew up with Stephanie Fontana, who is Tom Fontana's niece. And I actually met Tom Fontana when I was probably 10 years old. He came to our school and he was doing St. Elsewhere, and he, gave a little
Wow.
talk and stuff. And so,
That's
so
great.
I've always known
Tom
about
Fontana
Tom.
came to my school. I love it. That's great.
Yeah.
A shout out to
Yeah.
Tom. Yeah.
So like I said, I've been best friends with Stephanie, and after college, Stephanie started working on, because have a I remember in 1993, it was our senior year or our junior year in college, and we watched Homicide premiere on NBC after the Super Bowl, where the Buffalo Bills lost, but we won't talk about that. Um,
Oh.
yeah. um, but we watched it and we were so excited, and we are like, "Oh, this is Stephanie's uncle's show, and how cool is that it premiered after the Super Bowl?" And we all watched it and thought it was really cool. And then after we graduated in 1994, Stephanie went to work on set, and she was a production assistant on set in Baltimore. And I knew I wanted to live in New York after college, and I wanted to do something with television or movies. I just didn't know what that was going to be at that time. So I went. It happened that I needed one credit from Stephanie and I graduated from SUNY Fredonia, which is a state
Mm.
University of New York school of Fredonia, which is like an hour outside of Buffalo. And for to get I graduated, but I for to get my actual degree, I needed one more credit. It was, whatever, stupid. But so I decided to go to I wanted to I because I knew I wanted to live in New York. So I went to NYU to get a transfer credit from there to get my like official Bachelor of Arts degree from Fredonia. And NYU had an internship program where you could go on to TV shows, basically like
Mhm.
Law and Order, a lot of soap operas, film in New York. So, a lot of that. And that, of course, my first choice was Sesame Street, but I didn't get that. But
From Sesame Street to Homicide. That's
yeah,
funny.
who doesn't want to work on Sesame Street, right? But of course, it was already filled. Um, so after in 1995, I moved to New York to be at NYU, and I got my credit by working on Homicide: Life on the Street. I worked in the post production office in New York City, obviously through Stephanie and through everything. And so I started as an intern.
Mhm.
So I worked as an intern for I don't know how many months, And because of circumstances, I worked really hard, and I knew, like, as soon as I got there and I saw what was going on, and I was working with Jay Rabinowitz and Cindy Malo, and working with the assistant editor at the time, Jay Perez. um, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. So I worked really hard, and the production coordinator at the time, the post production coordinator, Debbie Sargent, said, do you want to have an actual job instead of working for free? And I said, yes, absolutely. I will do whatever you need. And so she made me a production assistant, which didn't really exist before that. So I was assisting the assistant editor, basically, and that finally started getting paid for it. So, which is really nice. And then worked my way up into assistant editor, because Jay Perez was such a wonderful teacher and so generous with this time, as was Jay and Cindy. Everyone was so generous and, like, taught me everything. Because I didn't know how to work Avid, I didn't know how to do any of the, it was all new to me because I didn't have any of that in college. We didn't have any of that equipment in college. So, yeah, so I worked from an internship to production assistant to assistant editor, and then Tom gave me a shot at editing an episode by myself, because at the time too we were doing, it was great. I mean, I know how lucky I was, because we were at the time, Tom was producing Homicide, Oz, during the summer, in between Homicide episodes, in between Homicide seasons. And then he was also doing a couple, because Jay, I think you worked on a couple, like, fire, there was two firefighter pilots that Tom was trying to get made, and, like, to develop into a series, but they never really came about. I think one became a TV movie, and I don't know if the other one ever saw the light of day. But so all of this editing was going on. So, like, his go-to editors, Jay and Cindy, and Greg Featherman was in there, and it was just, it happened that there was room for me to move up and to actually do an episode by myself as an editor. And so he gave me that shot, and yeah.
I'm curious for both of you, like, what do you think, and this may be too, like, esoteric a question to ask, because sometimes we don't know why we're attracted to certain things. Like, I probably couldn't explain to you why camera and the technology of the camera really attracted me. Was there
Right.
anything that really locked into you when you first started editing, where you were like, wow, this process is, like, really works well with my brain, or the way I can see things put together before they're put together? Is there anything like that that you can sort of point at as why editing was so attractive to you? Jay, why don't we start with Jay?
Yeah, there are, and there were. When I was in school, we were making some films of our own, and we would kind of rotate between directing and camera and production design or set design and editing, and just kind of rotate around the various crafts. And as soon as I got in the editing room, and my rotation, kind of took me through the editing room, I just felt at home. I felt very, very comfortable with it. And I felt like, I often use this analogy. I have never been able to uh, become bilingual. I've never been able to learn a second language.
Mm.
Not that I tried so hard, but it just didn't come naturally to me. I took French in junior high school or something, and had various other languages experiences here and there, but I never was able to pick it up and become fluent. And when I sat down to cut, I felt like it was a new language, or that I was learning, and that
Mm.
I could speak it, and some of the professors at NYU noticed that as well, so that encouraged me. And yeah, like I said, by the time I got out 4 years later, I knew that was what was for me.
And
Yeah.
did you start on moviolas or Steenbecks, or what were you cutting on back in the
Well,
day?
when I
Because
was
you
at
look like you
school,
might be almost my age, so I know we were cutting on Steenbecks. We were lucky enough to have Steenbecks at UMBC. when we were cutting
Yes.
film?
When I came up in the mid 80s into the system as an apprentice and an assistant and things like that, everything was still being cut on film. Um, and you know, I loved that. Very tactile
Mm,
and cutting and taping and splicing and that's the way I learned. When in fact, Homicide was the first digital experience that I had. Barry Levinson was
interesting.
very excited to make that shift. In fact, he wanted to cut Homicide on a British system called Lightworks. For some reason, he had been told about that. He had heard about that. And he was very excited about it. But Laurie Mazzillo, I think, among others, maybe the studio as well, felt that Lightworks was a little bit too new, and that perhaps the bugs or the kinks hadn't been worked out of the system yet. So they preferred and recommended that we cut on the Avid, which is what we did. Um, I went on the following year to cut a movie for Barry, which we did on the Lightworks. He
Mm,
remained very excited about that, and I was thrilled to have that experience. It's an excellent system.
mm,
I used it on some other films as well, but eventually Avid kind of competed them into the ground,
right.
and there's very few people who use it. But my understanding is that Thelma Schoonmaker, who cuts for Martin
Mhm.
Scorsese, she's one of the few people who still uses it, and I'm not sure
Mm.
that the company doesn't really basically maintain it for her. But I always found that pretty
Ah,
delightful.
interesting.
She's a kind of a rock star here in New York,
Yeah.
and uh, yeah.
So, Debbie, did you start, cutting digitally, or did you start on film as well?
No, I never cut on film, unfortunately. I never had that opportunity because Fredonia, I was a communications major. They didn't even have a film school, a film.
Mhm.
So I just did, I did tapes, like 3/4 inch tapes, putting them into the system, taking them out and
Yes.
pressing record. And,
And
it
that
was
big
very
clunky system, yeah.
primitive. Oh, yeah. 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 So yeah, Avid was the first thing I learned for editing. And I don't know if you remember, Jay.
Mm,
I was thinking about this because thinking about our conversation today, getting ready for it, and going back to watching Anatomy of a Homicide, the documentary, which your last podcast was fantastic. That was so interesting to me to hear Ted Bogosian talking about it and everybody, and
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 seeing
I
Jay
and
when
I
he was 12.
and seeing Jay
It was
with his
he
Neil
looks
Young
so
shirt on
cute.
T-shirt on.
I love it.
Um, but, I it was so funny because I remember when we were watching it as a post-production department, we watched the premiere of it when it aired on PBS or whatever it was, um, and we laughed because when Jay's in there cutting with Yash, they show, like, the other part of the office where usually the assistant editor would sit, but it was all this equipment. It was Don Blavo, who, God bless him, who we rented our all of our Avids from, and he was so like Barry, he was so excited about the new technology. So we were using Avid and we were using Media Composer, and I think it was called Nexus before Avid kind of really like
Mm,
like permitted it to it was going to be the next thing, but it wasn't really Avid wasn't really promoting it yet, but Don Blavell was so excited about this new technology because when I started in season 4 on Homicide, we were using, you probably remember, Jay, shuttle drives. So the drives would go from room to room. So we'd have to actually move the media from one room to the assistant station to another room so nobody was connected completely. And so Avid had just started this Nexus system where everybody could be connected at the same time. But the problem was we it wasn't Avid wasn't like it wasn't they weren't ready to promote it yet. They weren't ready to, establish it yet. But Don Blevel was so excited about it, he wanted to try it first. So when there would be nights when Jay Perez, the assistant, and I would be like, we would have to redigitize things because things would break down, and because the technology wasn't they haven't worked out the kinks all of it yet, and we'd call Avid and we'd be like, well, this is what, and they're like, well, we can't help you because we didn't tell you to start using this yet, so sorry, you're on your own. And that's why when we're watching Anatomy of a Homicide, you see Don Blavel in the background there, like working on, like, getting equipment out of it, because probably something went wrong the night before and we had to stay up all night and redigitize things. And, it was just,
Wow.
yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, no, sorry. That was a rambling answer to your question, but no, I've never worked on a Steenbeck or never got to work on film. So Avid was my first foray into editing.
There were a lot of technological advances over the course of that decade that
Yeah,
we were
for
making
sure.
Homicide.
Yeah, we were definitely the first one to use Avid in that way of TV shows because nobody was doing that.
One quick thing. I remember I had a copy of Avid DV Express in about 2001, and the Homicide Season 6 title sequence was used as a tutorial on Avid about how to use it. It's quite funny.
Oh,
Yeah. I wish I could
Really?
find
love
a
it.
copy of it now, but yeah.
that's so funny.
And those title sequences were absolutely glorious. I mean, when they made that, I think Mark Pellington made the first
Yes.
one.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who made the second one. I think it only changed once, as far as I know. We had the first one for several years, and then we got a new one, and I think that rode us the rest of the way. But they were very, very well done.
Yeah, they sped it up a bit for season 7 for some reason, but other than that, it was.
Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And so this is a question for both of you, but I think Debbie, because you started on the show, you didn't jump from something and having cut other films or television shows with different techniques. For Jay, having come from working with, maybe it wasn't as different, if that you were working for Jim Jarmusch and also doing documentaries and also doing music videos, which would have had more of an independent style. Maybe you had worked more with cutting film that was shot handheld. But was there? Tell us about when you came into Homicide. Um, did it feel different? Were you allowed to do things differently? I know the writers and other people and the actors and other people talk about, and even into the crew, the sort of freedom they had to try things, to try new things, to invent things, because the style of the show was so different for network television. So was it a leap for you, or also did you get any kind of directives from Barry and Tom, like, "We want it to look this way," or, "We want it to have this kinda energy?" Any of those kinds of thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. It was a very different experience. It was a unique experience, and yes, there was a directive from Barry in particular. Barry basically explained the whole operation as wanting it to have the feel of Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless. And of course, I knew that film from school, and that in itself made me very excited to work on the show. And he explained a little bit about what that meant to him, but really not so much. It was mostly just like that feeling and that vibe and that approach. And um and that was really fun and exciting to pursue. Very different from working with Jim Jarmusch and the few other films that I had cut. I mean, I was about 8 years or so into professionally working and stuff, but I had only cut a few things at that point, a handful of things, and this was the first digital one, and this was the first, and so it was different in many ways. Um, And like I said earlier, we rarely would go to the set, but he did call us down at the very beginning to Baltimore. The first editor and I went down there, and it was very exciting and chaotic. But we basically had this one meeting with Barry and Tom, talking about what they wanted the show to look like and what they wanted the show to feel like. And then I came back to New York and kept that in mind as I got ready to cut the second episode. But it may sound a little self-aggrandizing, and it's not meant to. But to tell you what happened, I started cutting the second episode. Barry had directed the first episode, and a guy named Martin Campbell was directing the second episode. A very interesting guy, Australian, I believe, and he was, the dailies were coming back up to New York, and I was like, okay, breathless, and like trying to put it together, and not worrying at all about continuity, and just looking for the most viscerally exciting moments in the dailies. And it was super fun, and I was very young and very, very loose, and I was into it. I was like, hey, let's go, let's do this. And because Barry was also an executive producer on the show, he was seeing those cuts as they were being sent around to the director and to the various other people on the show. And he and the first editor had finished shooting their show. Of course, we were shooting the second one, and they retired to Los Angeles so that Barry could be at home. And they were whacking away at that pilot episode, and Barry wasn't very happy with it, and he was very pleased by what he saw coming in from the second episode, and so he decided to make a change, and they let the first editor go. And I remember they called me on like a Friday, and they were like, Barry wants you to come to Los Angeles tomorrow, and he'd like you to go from the airport directly to the cutting room. Now, I had never gone to Los Angeles to work on a movie or a TV show, but I was pretty excited about it, and I did as he said. I went to the cutting room direct, and I found myself alone there in the cutting room, and he called me, and he said, "Listen, watch where we are with this pilot episode, and we'll talk." So I watched it, and then we got back on the phone, and he was like, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, can I just start over from scratch?" And he said, "Absolutely, that would be great." And so we just started over, and like I was doing with the second one, I just tried to feel my way through it, and keep in mind what Tom and Barry had asked me to do, and again, it was pretty fun and pretty easy. And eventually Barry started coming in, and we spent a little time refining the episode, and it was super exciting, as Debbie said, when they decided to put it on TV after the Super Bowl. Regardless of the outcome of the Super Bowl, it was still a very exciting place, and it was we were really proud and happy about that, and it came out good. Martin Campbell, when Barry asked me to go to L.A., had a little mini freak out and was like, "Wait a minute! If this is the guy who knows what he's doing, I want him here, and I don't want him
so
going."
funny.
And so I was able to do the first two together, and then we started alternating. We brought on another editor, and I believe that was Cindy Malo. We were finishing the show at a place, I don't know if it still exists, on the Upper East Side called Editel. And I think Cindy at that time was an employee of Editel, and we were finishing the first show there or something, and they asked her if she wanted to come on and be the second editor on this show. And one of the strange things about Homicide 2, one of many, is that most 1-hour dramas in the States had 3 editors. And so you would get into a rotation. You would do one, and then somebody else, and you would do the next one. But Homicide, whether it was a budgetary thing or what, decided to go with 2. And so it was a much faster pace. and we were just cooking all the time. By the time you were just getting ready to think about locking one episode, daily started rolling in on your next one. So you're always on your toes. And that was kind of good for the show because it was a frenetic pace to the cut and it was frenetic pace to the job itself. And that continued on for 7 years, although we never knew it would carry on from one year to the next. They never, ever gave us a heads up. They never gave us an advance commitment. And so every year we were like, maybe I'll see you next year or not. And that went on, I think, throughout the whole run. And even at the end of the 7th year, we didn't know if we were coming back or not. So Tom didn't really write an ending. And of course, they allowed him in the end to make a movie to sort of wrap everything up after the series had run its course. But that's sort of how that happened.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, that idea that they didn't, they weren't sure at the end of season 7 when the last episode of season 7 echoes the very first episode. It's almost like, and there's this beautiful montage. There's all this great stuff, like it was like they knew it was the end when in fact they didn't know, which is really kind of mind-blowing because it's a beautiful sort of wrap up. And having
It is.
even the similar conversation and the similar dialogue and location as
Mhm.
where it was in the first episode.
Yeah, it'd be more of a question for Tom as to whether or not he had an
Yeah.
inkling. But we had an inkling at the end of every season that we were not coming back. So, but he may have had some sense that it might not.
Right.
One random question. So, one of the things that always sticks in my mind as a signature edit in Homicide is the repetition of a shot 3 times or a line of dialogue. How did that kind of come about? Because I thought that was something really cool.
If memory serves, it was kind of a result of the initial approach of the sort of breathless approach, and but it's not really inherent in the breathless approach. The main thing about that film is that all the not exciting bits are cut out and everything else is kind of just jacked together, and it gives it a real kind of energy. And this double cutting and triple cutting came into effect out of that. It kind of grew out of that. And to be honest, over the course of 7 years, it started to become a bit of an onus and because producers would come in and they would say, "Oh, just do that thing, you do," and we would oblige. But it wasn't always the most spontaneous, and initially it was, but over time it became a little bit of a like asking a monkey to jump through a hoop. It didn't feel. It was an organic evolution to it, and then it became like a thing. If that makes sense. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Did they ever give it a name at all?
Not that I recall. I'll tell you one quick story about it, though. Tom had an actor called Lee Tergesen that he often used and would often show up in Homicide, and one night, I can't remember the exact reason for the party, but Tom had a big party at one of his restaurants. I think it was called Nona, and when I got there early, which might have been a mistake because Tom was there drinking his private stock of bourbon, and he invited me to join him. And I
Wild
just
turkey.
proceeded to get absolutely, yeah, I think it was actually Woodford Reserve, which I had never heard of before.
Oh, good one.
Tom introduced me to
It's
it.
a nice one. That.
And he would go behind the bar and get his own bottle of that. And I had never had anything like that in my life. And I was quaffing it down like water. Anyway, the restaurant was open, so there were public people there, but we had a big table, and eventually all the people came, and some of the actors came, and Lee Tergesen came, and he started berating me for exactly this triple cut thing. because he had a habit
Yeah.
of fixing his hair, kind of fluffing his hair. So I was asked to spice things up maybe for that scene, and I cut, and he's fluffing his hair, and I cut again, and he's fluffing his hair, and I cut again, and he was embarrassed, and he was livid with me, and we had
Great.
a kind of a knockdown, drag out, drunken yelling match in front of an entire restaurant of people,
That's
and
brilliant.
it was hysterical. But it was over exactly that this triple
That's
cutting
funny. That thing. Right.
shenanigans. Yeah.
It's so funny.
Did you get the other actors having a go at you for anything?
I don't
So-
recall. We rarely saw them. We rarely saw the actors. You
Oh,
know,
right.
this was an unusual occurrence. Yeah.
So I have kind of an opposite question for Debbie. Instead of like, did you have other techniques and had to change them as an editor when you got to Homicide? If you learned everything
no.
there, then when you went to other jobs, and obviously you guys both worked on other, Tom Fontana, Barry Levinson projects, but if you went to other jobs where they wanted more traditional editing, was that a transition for you, or did you sort of fall into it naturally after you'd had this more frenetic experience? Maybe traditional felt, I don't know, easier or more logical, or I don't know. How different was it to go to other kinds of productions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I really like consciously thought about it that way, but but it was so fun. I mean, it is funny when I think back that Homicide was my first job, and that we were so free to just do anything. Do anything. Tom would say, "Can we swear on this? Can
Yeah.
we use curse words on this pod?"
Yes. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Tom's, thing would be like, "Well, fuck it up. Fuck it up." And that meant just like do whatever you think is going to work to make this scene work, or to find an energy in whatever scene, or same thing on Oz. It'd just be like, fuck it up. Um and it was so fun. And then going, like you said, going to more traditional show. I think the second non-Fontana show I went to was Ed, the NBC show Ed. Was very traditional, uh, but it didn't really feel hard or difficult to make that transition, because I think you really just like, and probably Jay agrees, would be like, you're just speaking to what the script is. So it's the writing, and it's the performances that, Homicide let itself be that way, because there were, this crazy energy, like in a scene in the box or something, and someone was yelling at, or Pembleton was screaming at Bayless or whatever. Like, it lent itself to that frenetic cutting. But then there are scenes that were very traditional in Homicide as well, so it's just like, you kind of just go with what the script tells you, what the performance tells you, and how it's directed. So it wasn't really, yeah, it wasn't like, oh, I have to do it this way now. It was just like, well, this is speaking to me this way. So
I think that's exactly right, Debbie, and I think it was a great question and a great answer. When you sit down to cut something, you're feeling your way through it, and it is
yeah,
based on the script and the performance and the sort of, there's an inherent rhythm in the footage, so your
yeah,
dailies are rolling in, and you're responding to that. And
yeah,
I'm very curious to hear that answer, and very interesting. Yeah, it was a good training ground, I think, because of the freedom, and and
yeah,
and then the rest just sort of occurs naturally. You're picking up the sort of the nature of the flow of things in a scene, and
right.
to be free to do that. And I also like the encapsulation of the Tom Fontana approach to editing. Fuck it up. This was a common refrain.
That was also the beauty of being able, that he wasn't afraid to do that. He and Barry were fearless. You know,
Yes.
it was an NBC network show, and they weren't
Yes.
scared to do something completely different and something nobody's seen before. You know, and that gave us the freedom. Like his fearlessness, Tom and Barry, their fearlessness gave us like, yeah, let's try anything.
Yeah.
One thing, there's a scene I remember. I don't know if Jay, you remember this. I think it was the episode of La Familia where there was a body in a bathtub, and the bathtub was like blood, and it was so gory.
Overflowing.
Yes, and you just cut the shit out of that, and it was just like it was something like, I don't know how many cuts were in that one scene when you see the bathtub. And that was the most, and I remember I think I was an assistant at the time. I know I was. And I remember when you cut that scene, and I just thought, shit, I've never seen anything like this. And it was it just captured the, like, instead of just seeing a gory, bloody bathtub, you did all of these like tiny cuts to see the whole thing, and it was just it blew my mind. And so something like that, the fact that could air on NBC on network television, and is just amazing.
The fuck it up thing is obviously a kind of a generalization. The real directive underneath that is, help us communicate the energy
Right.
of the writing and the energy of the shooting. Don't tamp that down in the editing. Enhance it and push it. And that again was an ongoing directive.
Question: how was it working with the directors? Because there are quite a few directors who were not initiated to this sort of style, and then suddenly they come in and see the French New Wave and they're shooting something else.
Yeah, it was pretty hysterical. They, much like bringing me in because they thought I had some kind of experience in the film world, they were really excited to recruit indie film directors mostly from the East Coast, New York and they did that. But then as the show got rolling and the writer producers became more and more familiar with the style and the actors became more and more familiar with the style, there often wasn't an awful lot for the director to bring to it. Of course, there were some that put their stamp on it and made it their own, but there are others that didn't necessarily get it, and the actors and the writer producers knew it so well that they really start to feel like the show was almost running itself, and that could be very frustrating for a director. Like I say, some of them were great; they were all wonderful to work with, but some of them were frustrated by the process. We had this hysterical routine that we would go through because DGA rules dictate that a director gets 4 days in the cutting room with the editor before the producers swoop in and finish it up. And many times a director would at the end of his 4th day, feeling a little frustrated that he doesn't have any more time, but had done his diligence to kind of get the show together, they would often leave saying, listen, if you need anything from me, feel free to call if you want me to come in and look at it. And over the course of the seasons, the general response to that was, you are dead to me. Get out. Bye. and I don't mean to laugh. It's but it wasn't. It was not necessarily a director's medium. This homicide routine. They all brought something to it, but with varying degrees of frustration about the nature of it. Does that make sense, Debbie? Did I leave anything out of that little
Well,
description?
you're very you're very generous and very polite about it. A lot, especially, I mean, I'm sure in the beginning it was probably a little bit different, but by the season 7, yeah, we were ready to say goodbye to all the directors. As Andre Brower said it so well in the Anatomy of a Homicide documentary, there are guests for 7 days.
Yeah.
And he has this big smile on his face.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's
And
great.
it's like,
That's perfect.
Yeah, there's that great moment with with Yashimura, with Jim,
yes,
where he's walking back into the editing suite to regain
yeah,
control of the Subway script, and Gary
yeah,
Fleeter is doing. I'll name names because what do I care? That Gary
yeah,
Fleeter was doing exactly what you said, Jay. He's like,
yeah,
whenever you need me to come back, let me know. And Jim
exactly.
Yeah.
just turns to him and says, "Gary, you're dead to me," and walks
You're
into the
dead.
editing room. It was like perfect illustration of how segmented that process was for the different creative minds that were in that editing suite with you,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
when you're there by yourself, or when you're there with Tom, or when you're there with Jim, or the time period when you're there with the director. And I have
Yeah.
a jump off question from Chris's question about the triple cut thing. What was there also a similar understanding, or were those music montages? And I can't remember. I have a million scripts in a box in the house somewhere, but were the music montages that often were a real, like, punctuation point, it's often in the middle of the episode about what the theme of the episode was. Were those music montage? Sometimes they were at the end, but sometimes they're in the middle. Were those written in the script? Like put the music montage here as they're doing this or that, or did it organically happen in the episodes? And I guess it didn't happen in every episode, but
No.
many episodes had the music
Mhm.
and the montage.
Well, it's funny because I actually texted Stephanie last night, going over your questions, and I said, "Look, I remember specifically one episode where, which I did. Eric Overmeyer wrote it, and he wrote in the waitresses, Christmas Wrap, I think it's called. It was a Christmas themed episode. It was, around Christmas time or whatever. And we had that song, and the song was in the script, and I used that song, and we got the rights to that song. We were able to license it, basically. But other than that, I don't remember very many, maybe 1 or 2 other times in a script that a song was written into the script, but my memory is that especially montages were never written in. There's never a montage written into the script. It's just that comes about because we're trying to solve some issue or contain some sort of time period or whatever. Like that always came about. From my memory, Jay, in the editing room. That was never written in a script. But like I said, I only remember very few songs that were actually written in to the script. And even like I remember, like I said, getting the waitresses song. We got the rights to that. I feel like if there were other songs written in, we maybe couldn't have even gotten the rights to that. We didn't have the money to pay for it, to afford it. We were a very cheap show, you know, and, you know, and so, it was few and far between, I think, that we got, like, license that we
Mm,
got needle drops was
mm.
what we call them, which is, using the song, um, but that's my memory. I don't know,
That
Jay,
rings
if you
true to
have the
me.
same. Yeah,
Yeah, that rings true to me. I think it's something that evolved in the cutting room as on an as needed basis, and
right.
and we would mess around with different montages and different songs until something clicked, and we would,
Mhm.
and it wasn't as much of a regular routine. I don't recall how
Right.
often it cropped up or didn't crop up, but it was as far as I can tell, it didn't really. It wasn't like a gimme that we were going to do that in any given episode. It's just something that evolved as part of the editing process. I just also wanted to say, over the course of a discussion like this, many names pop up here and there, and over 7 years, you become kind of a family, and you work with these people week in and week out, and you can become very close. You mentioned Eric Overmeyer. He is just a wonderful writer and a great collaborator, and it doesn't surprise me that he may have written a song into a script.
He was
He's really,
very into
you know,
music. Yeah.
yeah, really musical, and that shows in the writing as well.
Yeah.
Even beyond
Yeah.
a needle drop, and just a wonderful collaborator. As were so many people on the show. You mentioned Yash. I mean, it was
Yeah.
amazing working with Yash. He really
Wow.
had a sense of Fontana's style and approach, but he made it his own. He took it to his own extreme,
Yeah.
and again, like what's different. I haven't worked on that many TV shows. Homicide really is the main one. I remember when we did the pilot for Oz, and I did some other pilots with Tom and Barry that might not have gotten picked up or whatever. But it's unusual, certainly in the world of making movies, for the writers to be in charge, and on Homicide, and I think maybe in television a little bit more generally, in the States at least, the writer is often the producer. The writers are often, as they work their way up, they may maintain their position as screenwriter, but also become a producer, and so they really
Right.
start being in charge of conceiving an entire episode. And that was fascinating to watch. I mean, I think the main ones were Julie Martin, Eric
Mhm.
Overmeyer, Jimmy
Yes.
Yashimura, and these
David
people like,
David Simon.
yeah, and David Simon after a while. Oh, that's an interesting story. I remember when David Simon first came into the fold, he
Yeah.
wrote the book Homicide, and
Right.
and he had been a reporter, and he started to, the show itself was being well received critically and everything, and he
Yeah.
decided he might want to be a part of that, and he started coming to the editing room, and he's and almost like a kind of an intern himself. And he
Yeah.
and he was like, "Okay, yeah, no, don't mind me. I'm just here to learn how this works." And that was absolutely fascinating. First of all, to have the original author of the material kind of hanging around, and this
Right.
speaks to this sort of writer-centric scenario, of the whole process. But as we know, eventually he got quite good at the television game. He made a little show called The Wire that I think is fairly well known.
At the reunion, I had seen David. I was lucky enough to do a couple episodes of The Wire, but then I've seen him over the years. But I always say, like, I remember him coming into the editing room when I was starting to edit on my own, being an editor, and he was also coming in and like producing for the first time, and it was like we kind of grew up together, in a way. Like, obviously, he had so much more experience and life experience before that. But as far as TV, we were like, well, let's try this and let's try this. And well, I don't know, does this work? I don't know. Let's see what Tom, so it was really, I feel like I have a little special bond with David, and also Anya Epstein too, was the same
Yes.
around the same time that she was becoming a writer producer, and coming into her own as well. And it was exciting to be working with the both of them, and like, just, we're all just like, oh, okay, well, let's figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a beautiful part of it. Anya, you're right. Anya and David,
Yeah,
two brilliant people, we sort of watched them evolve and
yeah,
and and become what they became. Very, very, and both of them so gracious about that process. Like, I'm
yeah,
new here, and
yeah.
let's figure this out, and really open, and that was a cool thing to witness in both of those cases.
Yeah, a bit of a process question. Are you able to just walk us through? So you mentioned already the director had 4 days to kind of work on an edit. So can you walk us through kind of like how many days the edit would take from beginning to end and sort of the various processes, and even how long the editing days were as well.
Yeah, and who was in the edit? Like, did you start by yourself when the rushes came in, and then who along the line was in with you in that process?
So they would shoot 7 days on per episode, and we would get rushes as implied on a daily basis, and we would be alone with the material for that 7-day period, and then I think we would have 1 or maybe 2 more days to complete an assembly. At which point the director would show up and have his or her 4 days. And and then the writer producers would step in to finish the episode, and that if Tom wrote it, it would just be Tom. But if it was another writer, it would be that writer and Tom. And they would come in and take it the rest of the way, which in my memory lasted like another week, maybe 7 to 10 days or something, if I'm not mistaken. So it was all really very, very fast, and like this constant thing in motion, and that was not a bad thing. It kept the pressure on us to keep it rolling, to keep it moving, not to get too precious, and to sort of hammer it out and bang it. And it kept the energy and the freshness of the experience similar to the shooting in that kind of at that level of energy. And that was sort of the process. And like I said, by the time the producer writer cut, we eventually would go to the studio and they would have a thought or two, and Tom would decide whether or not to entertain that. And that was always a fun part of the process for me. I particularly liked when he decided not to entertain that, but occasionally we did. I mean, it was not occasionally. We some things that made sense to us we would do, and other things that didn't, we would gently explain to them why that was not a good idea. But they weren't overly intrusive. They had this little period at the end of each show, and I think they knew what they had in Tom and Barry. Barry, of course, was busy also making films and stuff, and he would come in occasionally and direct an episode. And that was always fun and exciting. But in between those times, it was really Tom's was the driving force, at least in the cutting room. And that was kind of the routine. Yeah.
Yeah, I never was in the editing room with Barry. So by the time, like, later on, I think we would send him cuts, and I'm sure, talked to Tom and
That's
give
right.
notes to Tom and stuff. But I never spent any time in the editing room with Barry later on, in the later seasons. And same with Finnerty. We would send Finnerty cuts, but he never came in the editing room. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, the network was always interesting. They would have, and Tom would be like, well, we'll give him this one, but we're not doing this one. Maybe we'll do this one, we're not doing that one. He was very good about that, and they didn't actually have that much to say when it comes, as I've worked on, other shows later on, like where the network or the studio has had, is so much influence what's happening in the editing room. Like, and when I look back on NBC, they had very little to say. And the fact that we were such a different kind of show, I think either maybe they didn't know what to say, or they just were like, you do
That's
you.
funny.
You're on at Friday and 10 o'clock. Do whatever you want,
Yeah,
So,
although I have to add that that's the way it was, and looking back on it, that's the way it was. At the time, when some of these notes did come in from the studio, they
yeah,
could be very frustrating, and they could really get Tom's back up. And sometimes it really was a little short-lived battle. We didn't have that much time to make it a war, but we'd have a little
yeah.
battle, and we'd get through it, and we'd move on to the next thing. And if I may say, being in the editing room with Barry Levinson is an absolute joy. I mean, the guy is funny as shit. And so, not only was it fun to work on the show, but it was just so much fun to be with him. He's very, very funny man, and his editing direction could be a little tricky. Even on the very first episode, when I got it together, we started working together, and he's giving me notes and stuff, and he would say, "Listen, over here in this scene, put that thing, put the thing with the other thing." Okay, yeah, sure, that sounds good. And it was a real dilemma sometimes. And there was one thing, there was a scene in a grave, in a cemetery. A grave was being dug, and there was a backhoe, and the thing turned out to be the backhoe. Like, put the thing with the other thing, but it took me quite some time to figure that one out, and I never forgot that. I think it's a very good note from a director. Put the thing with the other thing, because that leaves you a certain amount of freedom, but also puts a little pressure on you to understand what that's supposed to mean. And a lot of them are apparent, and you just do them. But other ones like this, and he would say it over and over. Didn't I tell you? Didn't I tell you? Put that thing with the other thing, and he'd go away, and you'd work for a bit. What the fuck is he talking about? And eventually you'd hit it, and finally, thank you. Isn't that better? Yes, better. It's much better.
That's great.
He's
It's
a
like
real
the
pleasure.
shorthand, like you had to learn their
Yeah.
shorthand, the shorthand of it. And so I have a question. So you have the film coming into you. You're working on the film. You have suggestions from the network coming in sometimes. You have suggestions from Tom and Barry and who's ever in the editing suite with you. Did you ever have a chance to go the other way as editors, not as Barry or Tom, but you as editors ever have the chance to go to say, we need, and say, tell Jean or tell Alex, we need ABC on the next thing. Like we need more. We need more of the things with the things, or we need,
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to make direct requests to the set?
I did not very much. I'll tell you something that was interesting. As this schedule evolved after the first season, and moving forward, eventually, what Tom realized was that he would find missing pieces in the various episodes, and I think this is what you're asking about. And we would discover missing pieces in the various episodes, and so he started to build into the shooting schedule a day on each episode that was held there for go backs for previous episodes. Because, of course, the same sets and similar sets often, and the similar casts were around. And so he started to build in this little reshoot time, that we could take advantage of. We could be shooting at episode 7 or something, and we'd be finalizing episode 4 or 5, and we would ask the episode 7 people to grab something for us. And so it was like messages from the editing room, getting back to the set, and it started to be built into the schedule. But I never really did that in advance, to ask for something, because it was always quite exciting and interesting to see what was coming rolling in and see how we could get that put together. Um, I thought also you were going to say, besides asking the set for something, if we ever had an opportunity to kind of go our own way in the cutting room. And I will say that, aside from assembling it the first time on our own, um, uh, throughout all of those processes, 4 days with the director and a week and a half with the writer producers, they are definitely guiding you through what they think is best for the episode. But alongside of that, you're making thousands of decisions constantly based on your own instincts and intuition. And so even when it feels like, you're being manhandled by a rabid producer, I won't mention any names. You're still, there's some, you take some comfort in knowing that you're going to try to execute what it is they want, but you're going to execute it in your own way, based on your own instincts and your own intuition, and that's what's going to push it through. Um, uh, And I guess a little bit over time, over the course of the years, we did start to know, especially Jean de Segansac, who was shooting. He started directing, and so we would get to know him when he came for his 4 days.
Mhm.
And there did start to be some more communication between the shoot and the cutting. But mostly they were two different things in two different cities and two different worlds.
Do you have any memories of challenging or most enjoyable episodes?
I definitely had challenging episodes, but I think my favorite was probably Shades of Grey, which I did with Adam Bernstein.
Great job.
Because I think Adam, who I've worked with many times since that, who I've been lucky enough to work with over the years, up until like 2 years ago, we did a pilot together, which he's just a lovely, lovely person and a wonderful, talented director. And I remember Shades of Grey because and not only was it, I mean, it was a wonderful script and the performances were wonderful. Peter Garrity and Giancarlo Esposito. And it was just a lovely it was just a wonderful script about, all this, it was very impactful about racism, and it was just a really, but it wasn't like one of those episodes that like hit your head on, hit you over the head about this is what racism is. It was it was a lovely script. And I remember Adam coming in and he was so excited. He had a binder, like a 3-ring binder with all of his notes about all with the script and all of his like storyboards and everything. And he was so excited. And, and I was fairly still new to editing on my own. And he was just a wonderful collaborator. He was just like, let's I'm so excited about this. I think this is really good. Let's do this together. And we just immediately connected, and which is why I'm still friends with him today, and he's just so talented, and he just made me feel like, oh, I'm contributing. I can I have a voice in this as well. Like he was the first director who really made me feel that way. And that's my favorite.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really great. No,
That's
he
a great
came in at a
episode.
certain point and he started doing a fair amount of episodes. I don't know how many he did in
Yeah.
the end.
Yeah,
But
he came and he did a lot of Oz.
yes,
He was a contributing director producer on Oz as well
yes,
after that, because Tom fell in love with him as well. Tom was like, "Oh,"
yeah.
I mean, I don't know how. I would love to hear. I should ask him actually about how he even got connected to Homicide, but I know it was his first. He was doing a lot of stuff he was doing a lot of music videos, and then he was doing a lot of stuff on Nickelodeon. But this was his first like hour-long drama, network drama, and so he was like, "I'm here. I'm so excited." And he's wonderful. He's just a wonderful
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah, that was a great episode. And I think what bouncing off what you were saying, Debbie, um, instead of hitting you in the face with like, this is what racism is,
Yeah,
it was so layered, and so much of what happened was based on misunderstandings of what the other
exactly.
person thought they saw or did, and that it all and then everybody making assumptions, and then it
Yep,
all sort of resolving when they sort of find out what the actual circumstance was in the end. So it just really was a terrifically layered
it was
episode.
great. It was
How
a
about how
wonderful
Well,
about
it
you,
just
podcast.
Jay? What did you have a standout
Yeah, what's your
episode
favorite one?
or director?
yes. I got to work with many wonderful directors, and I do think it's a great kind of counterpoint to how dismissive we were implying that the show can be to directors. No, because when somebody puts that much thought and effort into it, it's like Adam did
Yeah.
on that one, then it
Yeah.
did drive through. And that
Yeah.
and he was special, and but he wasn't totally alone in that. There were directors that
No.
came in that put their stamp on it, that were very thoughtful and that did a wonderful job kind of guiding an episode into subtler territory.
Mhm.
Um, uh, um, I'll tell you real quick. I had a couple of favorites as well. I think that my very favorite episode was, I think, episode 6 of the first season. It's called Three Men and a Dina, and
Of course.
Tom wrote it, and we had a special
Classic.
guest star, Moses Gunn,
Yeah.
and it gives us an opportunity to talk about Andre Brower, who was just the most
Yeah.
extraordinary actor. When the show started in '93, I did not know who he was, but it was apparent from the first day of rushes that he was just burning the screen down, and
Eating up
so
the scenery,
perfect.
as they say.
Yeah, and eating up the scenery. I mean, and it was just such an amazing pleasure to receive these rushes and to be putting these scenes together. He was just operating at another level, and it was so fun and exciting to see. And in this one, um, if I'm not mistaken, although I don't totally recall, Martin Campbell came back. He had done episode 2, and I think he came back to do episode 6. And it was just wonderfully, wonderfully written and incredibly performed by the guest star Moses Gunn and by Kyle
Yeah.
Secor and by Andre. And it was a very, very special one to work on. And from an editing point of view, it was exciting. I remember, I can't remember if it was act 3 or 4, but the description at the top of the act in the script from Fontana was, there is a long silence. And he followed that up by saying, a very long silence. And he followed that up by writing, this is a silence that would make Beckett nervous. And I never, ever forgot that. And I just wanted to hold that silence in that room. If I could have held it for the entire 15-minute act with maybe a little line at the end, I would have done it. We just held it as long as we could because we'd been through a lot, in the first half hour or so of the show. And now we were going to wrap it up. But before we did so, we took a moment and we took a breath.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful writing and beautiful acting and
Yeah.
beautiful camera. Everything about that episode was spectacular. I loved it. I loved it.
Besides that the motto from Tom, "Fuck it up," which you guys took to heart, did you have I know, and this is I'm not comparing being in a dark room on a truck with you guys, but I know when I had my dark room set up in the truck, I always had, like, a little motto or a little something. Did yourselves in the editing room have a motto or a cartoon or something up on the wall that sorta kept you in the mode you wanted to be in?
I don't recall. I don't think I did, to be honest with you. If I did, it would have been a poster from Breathless, because I never forgot that directive from the very first episode, and that idea of keeping it fresh and keeping it tight, and not worrying so much about the technicalities of making a television show or a movie, but just let the energy of the writing and the performances and the filmmaking drive the experience. And we were very true to that over the years. A lot of shows have come and gone since then that might have tried to uh, recreate that style. But it's actually kind of hard to pull off and for it to seem organic.
Mm,
And that's something special that Homicide had from the very beginning, and especially at the very beginning, for sure.
mm, mm, mm.
Yeah.
Have you watched any of the restored, oh, well, we call it restored, but the sort of new versions of the show on Peacock? Had any thoughts on it?
I haven't yet. I'm excited to do so. When I first heard about it, I was excited about it, but I have not had a chance to do so. I'm curious about the reformatting of the aspect ratio, of course. Can't quite imagine that in my head. But I am curious about it, and I look forward to checking it out. But I haven't yet.
I mean, the fact that they couldn't get the rights, hopefully they'll re-release all of these with the actual music. The fact that all of the music is changed is a travesty.
Yeah.
It really,
Oh,
it
I
just,
didn't even know that.
It's
oh
it's
yeah.
not
No,
all, but
they
it's a lot. Not all, but it's a lot for sure. Yeah.
but a lot of the really important ones, you know what I mean? Like
Yes, I know what you mean exactly.
It's
And
really
I won't even
shocking. I
know,
did.
like, 30 years later, you're watching it and you think, I'm watching the scene, I'm thinking, that's not
this
what
doesn't
and then
feel
I'll go
right.
back and look at the DVD to find out
Yeah,
what the original music was. Yeah,
yeah,
interesting comment. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, I didn't know that at all. That
Yeah, it's
changes my
terrible.
enthusiasm for the rewatch. I mean, it's crazy because when you're making a film, the music is integral to the editing process. It's integral to the whole operation. So to swap that out just seems kind of batty.
It's like when we did get a song, like a lot of the cuts were made for that
Of course,
song.
yeah,
We cut, when we knew, oh, okay, we're gonna get this song, a needle drop, and it's just, I don't think it's awful.
I had no idea. I had no idea.
Yeah, I think the truly enthusiastic people have to get the DVD and simultaneously play the two together, have the soundtrack for the DVD
Go
and the
back and
image from
forth.
the Peacock version. Hopefully it will stay in
Yeah,
sync.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it definitely jumps out at you, even not having seen some of the episodes for a very long time. It's just you
yeah,
just know when you hear it.
right, right,
and
right.
you
So
have
Chris,
you.
go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, have you spoken to Jean or any of the other sort of DPs about the reformatting to 16:9, and how do they feel about that?
We did interview Jean twice, once by himself and once with Nick Gomez, and we just interviewed Alex Zakshevsky with Dave Thompson. Yeah, so we did. I'm sure. Yeah, so I'm sure our question was in there, Chris, about didn't we ask about the reformatting?
Yeah, Alex hadn't seen it, and Jean seemed quite enthusiastic about
Ah,
Yes, yes.
the look of it. Yeah, so Jean was less bothered. Alex winced when we told him it had been reformatted, but he hasn't seen it yet, so we
Interesting.
can't really comment for him. But yeah,
Interesting.
What was there a difference for you in the editing room between what Jean shot and what Alex shot? Did that make a huge difference, or was it very similar for you in the editing process?
What do you think, Debbie?
I was, I, I love Alex so much. He's such a wonderful, lovely man. But I know that when the transition first happened, there was a learning curve there that it wasn't the same. And I don't know how many people would be able to detect that. Being the assistant editor and logging the dailies, of course, I could see it. I saw it, but eh, he got it very quickly. But there was a few episodes I feel like that there was a little bit of a learning curve. But he's such a thoughtful, wonderful director and DP, and he understood the assignment, for sure. Like he was the ideal, like you couldn't make it better of him being, the one to come up after Jean to take over that job. Like he was the person to do it. So it all
Exactly.
happened,
Terrific to work with. Yeah, yeah,
wonderfully.
and
Yeah.
their styles were a little different and the look was a little different, but I
Yeah.
thought that made the show maybe even more interesting in those last episodes,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
last seasons.
And
So
also, we'd
Chris,
be remiss. A quick thing, Susan. Sorry. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention Wayne Ewing. Wayne Ewing shot the first season,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he did
yes, of course,
establish
yep.
the style of the show, much like we did in the cutting room, and that transition to Jean, if I recall correctly, was relatively painless. But
Yeah.
he did shoot the first season, and he did a spectacular job. And it was part of his work is definitely part of what established the look and feel of the series itself. Uh,
Oh, absolutely. And we've talked about him quite a bit, and we did reach out to him.
Yeah, we should try again actually, because I think last
Well,
time we reached
yeah.
out to him there was a storm happening, so I think so we need to pick that up. But yeah, we'd like to get him on.
I didn't keep up with him personally, but I know he was up in Woody Creek with Hunter Thompson for a long time,
Oh wow.
and he made a bunch of little films about Hunter, and they were close, and that may explain his erratic behavior and difficulty to be reached. God bless him.
A very left field question. Now, I know you were all in New York, and New York has an equal reputation for food as Baltimore. Now, we've heard stories about the crew were surviving on gizzards and things like that. What were you editors surviving on? What was fueling you guys?
I'm going to jump in real quick and say chocolate chip cookies, as evidenced in the anatomy of a homicide thing. You know, if you may have seen Don Blauvelt in the background fucking around with equipment, but I only remember one shot of me walking back from the little kitchen to my room with some cookies in my hand, and I just thought that
Oh, I
really
have to go.
that tells the whole story right
I
there.
have to go look at that again.
Oh, brilliant.
I didn't realize the cookies, but you're right. We
Oh
had
yeah.
a good supply of cookies back then. Yeah.
Mortifying. We ate well. We ate well. Tom
Yeah.
had a series of restaurants in New York,
Oh,
and we ate quite well. Tom is a bit of a foodie himself, and we ate well and we drank well.
Yes, we
nice.
did. There used to be a bar cart that came around on Friday nights at
Yes,
5 o'clock.
Hey, wait, we
a
didn't get
wonderful,
that. Wait, the bar cart. Wait a minute. Oh, that's right. We had
a,
6 bars across the street. Right, never mind.
a wonderful tradition. A wonderful tradition.
We always had good lunches.
We did. We did. Yes. In fact, one of the post supers made me a T-shirt that had a clock set for 10:15 a.m., at which time I would perennially ask, "What's for lunch?" And we would start to figure that out. These are the most important things about any
Yes.
cutting room.
That was important on the set too, and especially when we were in the squad room, was like, "Okay,
Yes.
where are we going to lunch today? What's happening?"
Oh, fantastic. So, is there anything else you wanted to add? Because I feel like we've covered a lot
No,
of ground there.
I think we sort of got to everything. We do ask everybody, why do you think the show has retained it still feels very pressy and very vital today when you watch it. It doesn't feel dated. Do you have a feel for why that is?
It's a very good question and a difficult one to answer. I mean, I guess I would say that the process of making it was not only a joy, but it was a, you know, they talk about capturing lightning in a bottle when you make a good movie, because sometimes you have a good script or you have a good shoot and you don't wind up with a good movie. But in this situation, we had, of course, great scripts and we had a great cast and we had great filmmakers on the ground in Baltimore. And you know, we were able to maintain that in the cutting room and bottle it. And I think that's why it's something fresh, exciting, and real about it. I think that's sort of the main thing for me. It felt real. And that's what the main thing about David's book was, you know. He embedded himself with this unit and he grew to understand what made these guys tick and what the job was like. And I think that the series was able to capture that to a degree.
Yeah. Nice. Debbie, how about you?
I love that answer, Jay. I think that's so right. That it was lightning in a bottle, and um you couldn't I mean, the fact that all of these people came together at the same time to make this thing, you couldn't eh, like I said, I look back on it and think like, "Oh my god, I was a part of this." This was amazing. I can't believe, and I didn't realize it at the time. And I thought, oh, every job is going to be like this. No, you know,
Mhm.
it's just, but I just think like everything that the episodes deal with, like we were talking about the racism and, everything that's happening is still happening. That's why
Right.
that's why it still matters, and it's still, and people can relate to it because it's like, oh yeah, well, I get it, as
Yeah.
eloquent as Jay, but
No,
Oh,
no,
no,
very eloquent, Debbie.
no, you
Very
said it
eloquent
still
indeed.
matters. That's absolutely, I agree with that. Yeah.
Can we do, with your help, Debbie, can we do a quick shout out to all the other cutters on the show? We mentioned Cindy Malo. We mentioned
Cindy,
Jay Perez.
yeah,
You mentioned Greg Featherman. We had a guy named Ned
yeah,
Bastille, got a couple.
Bastille, yeah,
Was there a
Who else?
Wayne
Who else?
Hyde? Was there a Wayne Hyde?
Wayne Hyde was an online editor at Editel. So when we
um,
finished the show,
Ah,
it would go to
okay.
Editel, and he
Because
would do the online editing. Yeah,
I
like
see
the
that you won the International Monitor Award for cutting the subway in 1998, and it says with Wayne Hyde, and I wondered who Wayne Hyde
That's right.
was. Okay,
oh,
Yeah, he
interesting.
was the online. He was the online editor. He put the
yeah,
final. Because
yeah,
when we were,
Wayne,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, Sylvia Waliga, we had. I don't know if you
See,
remember her.
Sylvia, I don't remember, but I know she was there.
All right. Well, we did the best we could. We had a great team. We had a great
We
Yes,
team.
did, we
and we
did.
did, and we wanted to talk to you guys because Jay, you had cut most episodes as an editor, and Debbie, you had cut most as an assistant editor. So you guys had
Ah,
cut, yeah, and also then obviously Debbie, then you did another 11 or 12 as a full editor. So
yeah.
yeah. Well, this has been great. Thank
Yeah.
you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
Really,
you
Thank you
both
so
really,
very, very
much.
much. Yeah.
really
Thanks
terrific
for including
insight.
us, even though we're a little bit off the
I
set.
Yeah.
But
know, yeah, yeah.
Homicide,
we're
life in the suite. I love that. What's
yeah,
the
but
Yeah,
title?
we definitely
yeah,
felt like a part of the team. We definitely felt like part of the team.
Oh gosh, it's
Oh,
so
and I
important
just
for the
want
look of the show. Yeah.
I also just wanted to mention, someone we haven't talked about was Jorge Zamacona, who was a
Oh
huge
yes,
part
as
of the
the
show
writer.
as
Yes.
well.
Yes. And
Yes.
we had
He
him
Yes,
was a
on
yes,
with
yes.
wonderful writer producer. Yeah.
yes. And we had him on with Tom and Julie, Tom, Julie,
Yeah.
and Jorge. We had on together to talk about the writing side of the show. So yeah.
Beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
No, they were great. Fantastic. Well, yeah, is there anything else anybody wants to share before we stop? Or
Yeah. Or anything you're working on now you want to mention?
I'm working on a very, very lovely film. It's an adaptation of a play called "Is God Is," and the play was written by a young woman named Alicia Harris, and she adapted the play and also directed the film. It's her first time directing a film, and
Wow.
uh, and it's spectacular. We're trying to finish it now, and I have very, very high hopes for it.
Oh, that sounds
Excellent.
great. We'll keep everybody out there, keep your ears and eyes out for that.
Yeah,
And
please.
thanks again. Thanks you so much, and enjoy your summers.
Thank
Thank
you very, very
you.
much.
Yeah,
You too.
and
It's lovely to
keep
see
in
Thank
you
you
touch.
both.
for
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Great
Thank
to
you for
see you.
making this podcast. I love it so much.
Absolutely.
cool. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. We love making it. It's been great connecting with everybody. It's been very cool. So yeah, thank you. So that was Jay and Debbie, and that was such a fascinating conversation, and so many little things sort of stood out. I'll just quickly say I was quite amused by the whole fuck it up principle from Tom Fontana, which did crack me up, where he encouraged editors to sort of take bold creative choices and empowering them to experiment and try things and prioritize emotion and energy over traditional continuity. And I think that really explains a lot of the behind the scenes of how Homicide sort of ended up on screen. So yeah, any standouts for you there, Susan?
Yeah, I love the story, your question about the triple cutting, and that it initially started out organically. It wasn't like, ooh, let's do that.
Yeah.
It was organically in keeping with the mission of keeping that energy of the way Breathless was shot and cut. But the fact that the first time they did it was because it made sense in the scene. Also, that funny story about Jay using the triple cut when Lee Tergesen fluffing his hair and Lee getting really pissed off about it.
Yeah.
Because the triple cut absolutely brings attention to itself on purpose. I mean, the point is to put a point on something, right?
Yes.
But I thought I have to go back and try to find,
I need to as well.
Where that
hilarious.
was.
It's poor Lee. Sorry, Lee.
That's funny. Yeah. And I also, and along with that fuck it up thing, I love that, and I think it was Debbie who said that Tom and Barry were fearless.
Yeah.
And their fearlessness gave the editors permission to try anything. And that the idea of being fearless, it's one thing to be a fearless independent filmmaker, right? Where you've gathered your money from different sources and people understand it's going to be a different kind of production. But to be fearless under this the heavy boot of a network television network, of a network that had never done anything like this before. And it may have been that we just kept going so fast that they didn't figure out how to stamp out all this interesting stuff we were doing, or that they were, that Warren Littlefield, that's the guy they talked to in the documentary, right? Were at some level open, definitely open to things that had not been done before. But the idea that fearlessness filtered down through the editors, and I think it filtered down absolutely through the set and through the way the show was shot and through the way we all sort of thought about the way we were making the film. Jay also talked about the editing enhanced what was already happening with the writing and the energy and the acting and what was happening on the set, the way we were shooting it. And so it was sort of organic the way the editing evolved to be groundbreaking and interesting. But it was because of all the different layers of interesting fearlessness that was going on the show. And Jay did the whole thing talking about how writer-centric the show was, and that he really appreciated that, like we've talked about before, that writers are often invisible once production starts, unless they have some kind of rights, to be on the set.
Yeah.
But that they were so integral because Tom obviously was a writer-producer, so integral to it. And then I often loved toward the end. I may be getting ahead of ourselves. Went toward the end when we asked why we think the show has retained its interest and is still relevant. And Jay talked about it was like capturing lightning in a bottle, that everything from the writing, acting, and the set, all that energy came into the editing room and they bottled it there, which I thought was a really great, allegory sort of to what they were doing and how and why it came to be that way.
Yeah, indeed. On a sort of technical note, what was interesting as well is how Homicide was one of the first fully digital network dramas in post-production. So they were the pioneer of using digital editing like Avid, because they were talking about Lightworks, which was an English program that
Barry liked.
Yeah, that Barry liked. And apparently Martin Scorsese's editor, Thelma Schumacher, used it.
Schumacher.
And I'm not sure whatever happened to Lightworks. I think it was used on a TV show called Babylon 5 as well, which is another favourite of mine. But beyond that, I'm not sure what's happened to Lightworks, because Avid became the kind of industry standard for many years, and then Final Cut Pro came in and sort of challenged Avid's dominance. And now, after Final Cut did an update that upset a lot of people, Adobe Premiere kind of became an industry standard as well. So between Avid, Final Cut, and Adobe Premiere is kind of where we are today with the kind of platforms that people use. But Avid was the one that kind of really started the whole digital editing ecosystem that's used today.
Yeah, and I did look up Lightworks. It looks like it's free. It's one of those sort of free. You can use at a certain level, and then you could sign up to pay, to pay for it. But I think it's still out there for, I don't know how basic it is, but it's still out there, and people apparently are still using it. And I'm just going to throw in, because I'm a film, grew up in film, not in digital technology. And it is interesting to show that the show was shot on film and cut digitally. It wasn't cut on film. But the systems that they mentioned and that I asked about, the Moviola was a stand-up. It was a stand-up editing machine that originally was interesting because I didn't know. We had one Moviola, I think, when I was at UMBC. All the rest of our editing suites, which was, I think, 2, had Steenbecks, which was a flatbed table with 4 or 6 platters. We had one with 4 or 6. I think one had because we were cutting the film and the audio together, so it had multiple platters. But anyway, so Moviola was stand up, originally made to be a home movie projector in 1924, somewhere in there in the 20s, and they cost so much it didn't go over as a home movie projector. And somebody suggested, why don't you incorporate these or modify these for film editing? And so then they became film editors, which is really interesting. They were like a stand-up machine had a little screen in the front, and then the cutting parts, like under where the little screen was, it sort of stuck out up in your face. And then the Steenbecks, they just recently went out of business. They went out of business in 2024. I have 1931 written down here as the Steenbeck company, whether they were making the flatbed editors at that point or they were doing something else. But the company just went out of business last year.
That's the end of an era.
And they were beautiful, really beautiful, easy machines to work. They had a big screen, big for the day, a big screen, and like I said, multiple platters for the film and sound. To go on. And then you would pull it off and mark it, or even if you were doing, tape splicing or glue splicing, right? You could do that right there on the table. You might have been marking it up to send, to get a print made. So maybe you're marking it up for like, here's where I want the dissolves and blah, 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 blah. But so those were the physical mechanical machines that were used to cut film before Lightworks and Avid and Final Cut Pro and all those came along.
And this was the offline edit as well, which is where the editors sort of make the story and cut it for pacing, etc. And then the online edit is where the actual original negatives, they go back to them, don't they? And they refer to them by the number code and recreate the edit off the original source material for better quality.
Right. And now they wouldn't do that, right? Now they would cut it and leave it digitally, wouldn't they? They wouldn't be shooting film.
If it was shot digital. If it's shot,
not shooting film.
Film's back.
A little bit.
Film's back.
Right.
Film is back a lot more than it used to be. Not for TV, but for movies. A lot of movies are shot on film at the moment, and a lot of commercials are too. And in fact, this year's been a big trend in commercials for shooting on 16 and 35 millimeter.
Really?
So like the latest Starbucks commercial is shot on 35 millimeter. It looks beautiful. And I think it's a bit of a pushback at the moment against the whole AI digital thing where everybody's wanting things looking more real and organic.
Right, everything feels so impersonal.
Yeah, so there's been a bit of a pushback. And obviously people like Christopher Nolan who shoot their films exclusively on film have re-inspired a new generation of filmmakers because to sort of go about it. The new Jurassic Park movie was shot on film, and that director usually shoots digitally. So there's all sorts. Film is sort of around, and it's more popular than it was a few years ago because film could have died a bit of a death, but it's kind of come back. And it's definitely nowhere near as popular as it used to be because everything used to be shot on film in terms of big movies and stuff. But it's not gone yet. Whether or not this is its last go around the block before it disappears. I don't know. I hope not. But certainly everybody would definitely edit digitally first, and then the online edit would, I'm assuming, be done by some machine automated that kind of cuts into the negative.
Mhm.
I've never done
The
online
time
editing,
code.
so it goes out of my area of expertise. I'm only talking by what I think logically would happen there. But
And do you know, is it Kodak and Fuji, or do you know who's making the film stocks?
I think it's only Kodak now, because Fuji stopped making cine film. They still make stills film, but they stopped making cine film a few years ago. But Kodak definitely are around. In fact, one of the men who works for Kodak in the UK, I met him when he started his job when I was at university, and I met him earlier this year, and he's still working at Kodak as their sales rep. It was quite funny. So
Oh,
I could
cool.
have.
Ask him if there's any new stocks, if because it's come back, if there's been a demand for, anything that's,
Well, the other stock that was mentioned by Alex, the 5219 or 70.
Well, we were
Yeah,
doing 72 because it
7219.
was
That's it. Yeah,
16.
yes, the 7219 is still around and still used. Is a very popular stock. So for 16, and 5219, I think is the 35mm version. Is that right? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, the 50s
Yeah,
are the
that's
35s.
it.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, if you think about it, people thought that painting and drawing was going to go out the window, and photography was invented because it reproduced everything so perfectly. Like, why would you still want to paint a
Yeah.
picture or draw a picture? And obviously that never disappeared, because the interpretation, through the kinds of tools the artists use. So, maybe film, because it does have, inherently, it just has an inherently different quality. No matter how much you want to make digital look like film, or like, put an overlay, a grain overlay on it.
And it's very effective. But yeah.
Yeah, Dave talked about adding quote unquote grain, when they were shooting with the Ronin system. But I just think it's really hard. I was watching a film the other day shot by Leon Shamroy, who was a famous Technicolor. He probably did black and white too, but famous Technicolor cinematographer. It was I've been, I have to write a book about Westerns,
You
or write
should.
something about Westerns. I'm like totally immersed myself in the Western myths, but also my brother and I have been reading a lot of actual real American Indian history, which is absolutely. I would encourage everyone to read books about real American Indian, Native American history, because you ain't never heard none of it anywhere in school. You never heard it correctly. You never heard any of it. Like, literally, you never heard it. So Leon Shamroy, the film was called The Bravados, with Gregory Peck. And it has some absolutely, like, I think Leon Shamroy was pushing the envelope a little bit with what he was doing. A lot of the film starts out shot at night, but it doesn't look like it. It probably was day for night with a blue filter, but it doesn't look like day for night. When we shoot day for night, what would happen would be you'd shoot in the daytime and you'd underexpose it so that it looked darker, but you could always tell day for night because the shadows are really crisp. It just looked like a dark day. It didn't look like nighttime. Anyway, so there's all this beautiful bluish nighttime stuff in the film, but then there's also these incredible shots of, like, it's sort of a revenge film. Gregory Peck going after the people he thinks that killed his wife. And there's these beautiful silhouettes, a complete utter blackness of his silhouette on the horse against these amazing backdrops and sunsets and stuff. It's just absolutely stunning. But also that weirdly overly rich color and that Technicolor had, that I don't think, I mean, I guess you could pump up digital somehow to look like that, but it's just absolutely beautiful film. When you see a film that's shot correctly, in Technicolor or later, we obviously didn't use Technicolor later. It was an incredibly bulky process, running 3 sets of films through the camera at the same time.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Which is just ridiculous. I don't even know how they did that. But anyway, so yeah, I would encourage everybody to do everything that probably nobody wants to do. Like, go back and look at some beautiful old color films. And I just don't think that obviously digital films look great. They're beautiful. But I think there is room there for the rebirth of an appreciation for what film looks like and what you can do with film too, mood-wise and color-wise and all those things. You could do with digital, but there's just something different about it.
I know what you mean. Yeah, there is. I've been very much thinking about it a lot lately, and it's just, there's something very unique to film.
Also, I think sometimes even when I watch like one of the broadcast nostalgia channels that I watch, because I watch a lot of stuff, believe it or not, over an antenna, people. It's actually a lot of stuff. Digital, the digital broadcast has brought out all these amazing, amazing things you don't need to stream for. Anyway, so one of the networks called Movies TV Channel has 2 film noir nights, all day Thursday and all day Sunday. And if you watch like The Big Sleep, or The Maltese Falcon, not just the blacks, but the gradations. These are black and white films, but the gradations in the grays are so absolutely rich and beautiful. Now, I should know who shot those. I know Ernie Howler. Ernie Howler might have shot The Big Sleep. Ernie Howler was an amazing black and white cinematographer who also shot a lot of Betty Davis movies.
And James Wong Howe's the other one I remember is classic.
Right, James Wong Howe. Yeah. So there I go again on a rant. It's people go watch some film noir, really high end film noir, the black and white film with an amazing black and white cinematographer like James Wong Howe, Ernie Howler.
Yeah.
People like that, and you'll just see how gorgeous the gradations in the grays, the black to whites are. It's just beautiful. Beautiful stuff. Okay, we got off the subject. Sorry, editors.
So the editing on film, you're physically cutting the film. And I think that's something a lot of people probably nowadays don't quite understand. I mean, I remember when I studied film in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was at the beginning of the digital age of filmmaking. So I was very lucky to be kind of dipping my toe into both worlds. But even then, as a teenager, learning that you were physically cutting the film, or with cameras that you had to hold your eye to the eyepiece so not to let light in, and you had to have a focus puller on the camera, all seemed a bit like, what the heck? It was a bit of a mind-blowing situation for me. And obviously nowadays it's got a lot easier in certain areas. Obviously the skills and requirements are still there, especially for focus pullers. But the fact, I must admit, I never got on with physical editing. I grew up with digital editing. I grew up on something called VM Studio was the first thing I used, and I used Avid, then I went to Final Cut Pro, and I'm on Adobe these days. Mainly for economic reasons, I've shifted to different platforms. It was always mind-blowing to me that people would physically cut film, and also how slow that feels in comparison to digital, and the fact that with digital you can explore different choices and it not being a major deal, whilst with film you'd have to get duplications done to be able to do different edits of things, wouldn't you?
Right. Hopefully you're working with what we call a work print, which was a dupe of your original. You're not cutting your original unless you're a film student and you're shooting Super 8 and that's all you got, right? But once you got to 16, we were making work prints and cutting the work prints. So you could put the work print back together, mark it up differently. You could try different things, but it would not be as quick as digital cutting. But I just remember I loved the smell of the film and the tactile nature of working with it. And I loved being in the editing suite in college. I didn't edit after that, but I loved cutting film and cutting the audio with it. It was really fun. And then if you're marking up the work print, like I said earlier, for the final print, where you're also marking it where you want the fade ins and fade outs, and you want the dissolves to happen, you are not seeing those, right? You would be able to look at that. I would assume in digital cutting, you could try, like, what would it look like if we dissolve from A to B?
Oh, you could easily do that in digital. Yeah, but not
on
film.
But in film, no. You mark up the work print, and then the people that are actually, cutting it and then reproducing it and then having to lay over the layers to make the dissolve happen. You don't see that until you get your film back.
And it's all about timing and frame rates, isn't it, and stuff. So I guess
Yeah,
it gets
so
very technical, which is good
yeah.
because it's the technical thing that leads to the mastery of it, which digital makes it a bit easier. So some people think that there's less mastery going on, but that's open to debate. And as a whole, I think digital's amazing.
No, I think you'd still have to have an eye for timing and artistic everything.
Well, it's all about feeling. Good editing is
Right,
about feeling and emotions, and it's about, does cutting at this point serve the story and the emotion of the moment? Because I remember years ago, one of my films, there, we had a choice between two angles when the characters sort of having a very emotional breaking down moment. And if the original cut, we cut from one shot to another, but I wanted to stay on just a single shot for that moment, even though it ended up being a bit longer than we would have liked it to be. But I felt like actually it served the emotion better. So you make sort of choices like that, basically, I think, with editing. It's not just a technical exercise. It's very, good editing's emotional.
Yeah, and going back to what Jay said about Tom's note, there's a pause here, a very long pause, a very, very long pause, a pause that would make Beckett nervous. That idea that he knew from writing it what he wanted it to look like and what he wanted to hold on and what he wanted to sort of lay with the viewer, right? That just really lays down with the viewer, like if you have those kind of dramatic moments. And you can obviously make dramatic moments better in the editing. You can also almost create them, right? If let's say a scene doesn't have enough energy, right, then you end up with, you can do the montage. I love that they said that they didn't really, the montages on the whole sometimes, but on the whole were not written into the scripts. They were there, like Debbie said, to either to bridge some scenes or to solve problems, like we need to get to A to B and we need to show all this stuff happening, but we only have 30 seconds or what. She didn't say that, but that the montages sort of came organically as they were cutting as an organic answer to what happens in that point of the story, not as like, here it's in the script, have a montage of them all grabbing their guns and running out the door.
Yeah.
That it worked with the energy and the movement of the show.
And it's interesting you mentioned the montage of Homicide, because they went on to inspire another TV show called Power. And they use a lot of montages in that show as well, and it is very reminiscent of the ones in Homicide that were so integral with the music. And this is why obviously the changing of the music becomes a very sore point with the restored versions and so on, because once you change the music, it kind of changes the unintentionally changes the editing rhythm, and it doesn't always work as well, or it loses
because they're
some of
cutting
the
to the
power.
music. I mean, not to the
exactly.
beat, because
No.
that's sort of taboo to cut to the beat, but they are cutting to the energy of whatever musical score they had at the time. And just to put a little plug on that, so Power uses some of the techniques of Homicide, but you said you found out that the showrunner of Power is a huge Homicide fan.
Yes,
correct?
yes, that's correct. And she hosted the Paley Fest chat of 2018, which had Andre Braugher, Richard Belzer, and quite a lot of the cast and key
Anya
creatives.
and David.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And I think it's the last time I think that Andre did an interview about Homicide publicly. I could be wrong there, but I think that's certainly the last one I remember him doing about Homicide.
And what's the showrunner's name?
Courtney A. Kemp, who's the creator and showrunner of Power. So she's a huge Homicide fan, and so she hosted the Paley Fest conversation that happened in 2018.
So Courtney, we'd love to have you on and talk about how much of an influence Homicide was on Power. Greer, maybe we'll get Greer to convince you to come on.
Yes. Oh, yeah, you were talking earlier about it being a writer's medium, and obviously we mentioned about the directors, because I obviously have an interest in directing, and how the directors were considered as guests, and many directors did struggle with Homicide's sort of editing rhythm. And then obviously the director would get 4 days on it, and then, to quote James Yoshimura, "Gary, you're dead to me," which meant that he's no longer needed in the editing suite because the producers are going to take over and play with the edit some more and get it to where they want it to be. So so we should have probably asked about how many directors' cuts managed to survive that process.
Yeah, it was interesting, because in the documentary, you think that that's just Jim being Jim saying, "Gary, you're dead to me." After Gary is leaving the editing room, Gary was, for people who hadn't listened to that, Gary was the director of the Subway episode that Yash had written, and wanted to sort of put his stamp on the show, and had come into the editing suite. And then as he's leaving, he's like, and we said this, he's like, "Hey, if you need anything, Yash, just let me know." And Yash says, "You're dead to me." But from this interview with the editors, it seems like that was the motto. that was a motto,
jokingly said,
of the editors and writers. Yeah. It's like, see ya. Like, you had your 15 minutes of fame, and now we get the show back and we put it where we want it, which was pretty interesting. And I also like the fact that Jay said they didn't really have a motto per se, but that if he had anything, whether he did or not, but he would have had a poster of Breathless. Yes. On the wall. And I want to remind people, it's the Jean-Luc Godard Breathless, I think 1960.
Not the Richard Gere one.
Not the Richard Gere one, which is absolutely fun movie.
I've not seen the Richard Gere one, actually. I must watch it at some point.
Fun. I remember, oh my God, I had such a crush on Richard Gere back in the day. And fun movie. But the one that influenced Barry and Tom, and that they wanted to capture some of that lightning in a bottle from Breathless, is the Jean-Luc Godard, French New Wave film. So people, if you could find it, I had a hard time finding it. I finally dug it out somewhere. I think it was on YouTube, because every time, I think I've said this before, I clicked on it on, wherever, whatever, menu I was on, it would give me it would show the Jean-Luc Godard still. And then you'd click on it and Richard Gere's version would come up. And I should know who directed that. I don't even know who directed that one. That was in definitely 1980s. And the one thing, I don't have a lot of regrets in my life. This isn't a huge regret, but
Jim McBride. Yeah.
Jim McBride. When I stopped working with John Alonzo for reasons which may be articulated at some point, I stopped working for him. The very next film they did was a Richard Gere film, That Crew. And I was like, oh no.
You know what? I have a similar thing, less dramatic. I remember years ago I used to work for this music magazine, and it was startup, so I wasn't really getting paid properly. And in the end, I gave it a year and thought, I have to move on now. And the second I moved on, they go and interview my favorite band. And I'm like, oh.
Who was that?
Yellow.
Oh.
My favorite band, are a Swiss band, Swiss band, very famous for a song called "Oh Yeah, Oh Yeah," that was in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Not their best song by any means, but that's their most popular song and made them millionaires. It was just funny. So ironic. It always happens. You decide you've got to move on for good reasons, and then something like that happens. You're like,
what the heck did I do that for?
So annoying. We call it Sod's Law here. I think in America you call it Murphy's Law or something.
I'm trying to see. Annoying. It might have been in. It wasn't Pretty Woman. I don't think it was Pretty. I think it was Internal Affairs. Yeah, it was that. It was Internal Affairs, because that was Alonzo.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and the camera operator, who unfortunately passed away, Pernell Youngblood Tyus, I think teasingly sent me an 8x10 signed photo from Richard Gere, but I always suspected, because the signature was so beautiful, I always suspected that his wife B had actually signed it to sort of, razz me a little bit with that. I don't think I kept that. I probably should have, but I've kept most of my stills, but not that one. That's
well, the only way you could check is if you then Googled an official
signature.
Autograph of Richard Gere. You might better find out that way.
Well, I think it's gone, so I don't want to know now.
Yeah, not to worry. Oh dear. The only other interesting technical thing was that Homicide was different from other shows as well, because most shows hire 3 editors, so 3 teams of editors basically, whilst Homicide only had 2.
Right.
So it meant that he worked at a much faster
That
pace.
was interesting.
Yeah, so that was also an interesting little thing.
Yeah, when Jay said they were, and I loved all the sort of terminology when they were about to lock the show. The dailies from their next one would be coming. So it's schedule wise, yes, he's not working on the very next episode. He's working on the one after that, because the very next episode somebody's already cutting, right?
That's it.
But yeah. So, and like I said, in addition to Jay and Debbie, who we chose not just because we knew them a little better, but on the set, I never met anybody that was in the editing suite because they were in New York. But Jay had done the 26 episodes, and Debbie did 48 as a assistant editor and 11 as a full editor. But Cindy Malo was the other editor in that two-person rotation from 93 to 98. And Cindy Malo cut 24 episodes, but she was also the supervising editor, the editorial supervisor of 12 episodes from 94 to 96. So Jay, Cindy Malo, and then I'm going to read everybody else's name. Ken Eludo, Jay Perez, Debbie, of course, Greg Featherman, Sylvia Walliga, Ned Bastille, and Richard Harkness were the editors. That's now, there may have been more, but this is what's on IMDb. And then the assistant editors, in addition to Debbie, were Susie Silver. Jay Perez also was an assistant editor before he became a full editor. Leon Martin, Donna Donato, John Bynes, Tiante Kelly, and Anthony Black. So that's who I have as the assistant editors, some of whom, moved up and were also cutting the show later. So huge team of editorial people.
Yeah.
Kudos to everybody for all that work, because of the kind of non-traditional, frenetic camera work we were doing, and the kind of dailies they were getting is not what they were used to. I don't think any of them were used to any of that. Maybe Jay, because he'd done a lot of music videos, there was more of that taking risks with things. But yeah, kudos to the whole editorial department, and thanks so much to Jay and Debbie for giving us a behind the scenes peek into the edit suite, where they were apparently eating lots of chocolate chip cookies.
That's it. Yeah, it's chocolate chip cookies and nice lunches at. Finding out
Yeah,
about
and at
Tom's restaurant. I'd never heard about this before. It's brilliant. And I don't think does he still have a restaurant?
I think we asked someone else that, or asked him that, and I think no.
No, gosh, that's a shame.
More recently, maybe just within the last few years, not at the moment.
Because otherwise next time I'm in New York, I would have gone knocking on the door.
Yeah. Well, I think we should just show up at the what they call it. There's
the library.
It's a name for his place. The knock on the door.
Knock on Tom's
with
door.
The former library. Where he lives and where he has the edit suites and where he has his offices and everything.
My God.
And apparently his bottle of which kind of bourbon was it?
There was Woodford Reserve was one that was named.
Right. I think he also likes Buffalo Trace or Bullet, one of those two.
Buffalo Trace, one you mentioned, and then there was also Wild Turkey got mentioned as well.
Oh yeah, Debbie threw that in there. She threw it in well.
But they're all very nice. Woodford Reserve is the FBI's.
Oh, Woodford Reserve. They're all bourbons. Absolutely. Yeah, Woodford Reserve is like top of the line.
That one's from Kentucky.
Well, they are. If they're called bourbon, they have to be from Kentucky.
Ah, okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
A bit like champagne has to come from the Champagne region.
Yes.
Got you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If it's elsewhere, it's whiskey. Yeah.
So that was Jay and Debbie. So thank you to both of you for being on the show. It was a really great chat, and I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as we did recording it.
Yeah. Great behind the scenes. Look into the edit suite, which who the heck knows what's ever happening in there. And thanks to them for spending so much time and being so open and candid and excited to tell us about what they do and how they did it on Homicide.
Indeed. Yeah. Thank you again. And thank you everybody for listening, and we will catch you on the next show. Take care.